Greetings, and thank you for joining us for this very special AACUC Commitment to Change Credit Unions Unite Against Racism Wednesday conversation, America's Credit Union Organization, CUNA and NAFCU merger. We're so glad you're all here. Please note the housekeeping rules for this afternoon's event. Now, we know life happens and you may need to step away, take a call, or even have a conversation. So we ask that you immediately please mute the volume on your microphone or device, as well as stop your video. Note that these functions can be found at the bottom of your screen or your device. Now, you are important to us, so please don't forget to start your video upon return, as we are truly connected. And remember, unless you're called upon as a program participant, please keep your volume muted on your microphone or device. Now, we encourage you to engage with us throughout this chat with the virtual clap and chat. Now, without further ado, please help me welcome our very own President and CEO, Ms. Renee Sadie-White.
Thank you, SB, and thank you everyone for joining us at lunchtime, no less. And for some of you, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, so we appreciate you coming. When I heard about the merger, I was in New York and Jim Nussle called me. And I said, wow, Jim's calling me, it's after 5 o'clock, must be important. And it was important. He was telling me about the merger. Well, would you know that during that call, Dan called me too. So what that said to me was they are both making sure that we knew something was up and that something was great happening. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that our membership was also aware of why the merger is occurring and what it's going to do for the industry. I think the merger should happen. I'm really pleased about the merger. I do have questions, and I want to make sure that all of our questions get answered as well. The other thing that is so important to me is that I'm really grateful that Dan and Jim made time to be here with us today because they're extremely busy. And Maurice Smith came out of retirement just to do this for us. So we're really, really grateful. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Maurice Smith so he can start the moderating. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Renee, and good morning to some of you and good afternoon to some of the rest. My name is Maurice Smith, as Renee has mentioned, and I have the pleasure of hosting this special Commitment to Change edition. Now, you've likely heard these two giants in our credit union business coming together to form a new trade association. You've likely heard that before we announced this call. But over the next hour, we'll learn a little inside baseball on how this is scripted to work and perhaps what it means to you. So Dan and Jim, thank you both for the privilege of being involved in this conversation. You two need no introductions, but just in case there's a newcomer here on the call and they need a little help understanding who you are, Jim Nussle is the president and CEO of the Credit Union National Association. And Dan Berg is the president and CEO of NAFCU, the National Association of Federal Credit Unions. These storied institutions are credited with most of the successes that we have shared and we have enjoyed as a credit union movement over the decades. Now, as a credit union nerd, I have goosebumps about this dialogue. NAFCU was formed in 1967. Dan, I was 10 years old when NAFCU was formed, so I hadn't quite made it to the movement just yet. CUNA was established in 1934. Jim, I wasn't around in 1934, but I've read the stories about it. And many of us have seen the photos of Estes Park and the likes of Edward Feline, Roy Burgengren, Louise Herring, and so many others has shaped the way we think about credit unions. This moment feels like a special time for us in history. So you two are busy leaders. We have an audience that's hungry to hear from you. So let's get into this conversation. I have a series of questions that I've already queued up that I would like to ask the two of you. And let's just take turns on who goes first with answering the questions. And so let's have Dan, you answer this first question, then followed by Jim. And then the next question, Jim, you will lead off with an answer followed by Dan, if we can go in that order. Here comes question number one. The combination of CUNA and NAFCU feels like a historical moment to me. Both institutions have been serving credit unions for a combined 145 years. What will history say about this unification? So what do you think about that, Dan?
That's an interesting question. And now I'll go back a little bit. When I started at NAFCU, goodness, almost 20 years ago, 17 years ago, there was, I don't know, 14, 15,000 credit unions within the movement. And now there's 4,700 credit unions going on. I think this is one of those times in history where, you know, our industry cannot afford two national trade associations. It's just not a sustainable business model in a consolidating industry, first of all. Second, here's an opportunity to create a new trade association that's going to be extremely powerful. It'll be probably in the top 5 largest trade associations in Washington, D.C. CUNA already has a large PAC, and combine our PAC, the opportunity to have an enormous political action committee is there. And then to combine the forces of, you know, CUNA, the leagues, and NAFCU from a grassroots standpoint is extremely important in order to keep our, you know, interests in front of the members of Congress as well as our prudential regulators. So I think looking back on history, this is a wonderful opportunity to create this new organization. This is not going to be a NAFCU 2.0 or CUNA 2.0, but I think people are going to look back and go, this was the right thing to do for the credit union movement. Jim's the right person to be leading this. And, you know, the boards have come together and started talking about this several months. So I think people look back on this as something that needed to be done. It's been talked about over the years, as everybody knows, and it came to fruition. And the timing's right. And I think history will dictate this was the right move for the credit union movement.
Very good, Dan. Thank you for that. So you mentioned the number of credit unions that are in the nation today. It struck me maybe about a year or so ago, maybe 18 months ago, when we fell under 5,000 credit unions in the nation. And the last time we had less than 5,000 credit unions was 1943, if my math is correct. This feels different. The world has changed. And so it seems reasonable that those of us who work in this business have to evolve and pivot with those changes as well. So Jim, what do you think history is going to say about this moment?
It's a great question. I've been thinking, I had the opportunity to think about this while Dan was answering as well. And I first of all, I agree completely with what Dan's assessment is. I think it's not only Dan's assessment. I share that assessment. Our boards shared that assessment, which is the reason they thought this urgency of doing this right now was so powerful. If I had to guess, and none of us will know exactly, but if I had to guess, I hope what history says is that this happened just in time. It happened just in time for the challenges and opportunities that the credit union movement was about to face. Some of them may be existential, some of them may be disruption that we've seen in other marketplaces around the country. For instance, in hotels or in transportation or in retail. Financial services certainly has had its share of disruption, but none like we've seen in some of those other industries. So it happened just in time to help us not only be the right advocates at that moment in time, but also to bring together the forces of good for growth for our movement and our industry at a time when our members need us probably as much as they've ever needed us in history. So I hope that they look back and it will not be as powerful as the start, but I do think it could be just in time for some challenges and opportunities that we will be facing in short order.
Very good. Jim, both you and Dan talk about bold leadership and what it takes in a moment of change when we have to make these big decisions. And so we often talk about disruptions as well. And it takes bold leadership to get out ahead of a disruption so that we aren't disrupted by some external force for which we have no control. So I salute the two of you and the leadership and the management of both organizations for taking this step, because the world is changing. So what are we going to do to react to it and keep credit unions strong? Thank you for your comment. Jim, let's start you off with this next question. And so why name the new organization America's Credit Union? So what does that mean to you?
Well, I'll tell you and Dan and I, and I'm sure many people out there who have built a brand or have tried to go to market with an organization, discover that it's not easy to do that ever, and particularly with regard to CUNA and NAFCU, and it's been difficult on Capitol Hill to walk into an office and to be immediately understood. What is a CUNA anyway, especially to new staffers, new members of Congress? What is a NAFCU anyway? We have so many acronyms we throw around in Washington, D.C. So I can testify that oftentimes when we walked into an office, after we gave them the business card that said CUNA, or after we gave them the business card that said NAFCU, what we said was, yeah, we're with America's credit unions. You don't have to worry about the acronyms. Even in our own industry, I was amazed to discover the confusion in the marketplace between CUNA and CUNA Mutual. I had people ask me about my private jet. They would say, well, don't you have a jet? And I said, well, no, that's Bob Trunzo. Every time I go to the airport to try and get on Bob's jet, they say I can't get on. So I don't think that. So there was a lot of confusion between CUNA and NAFCU and CUNA Mutual, and so we thought this was a powerful way to bring everyone together under a united voice and a united umbrella that just describes it the way we think about it. These are America's credit unions, and that's who we represent.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Jim. So, Dan, what are your thoughts on America's credit unions?
I think it's a great name. I think it's just a new umbrella. It's a powerful name. It's going to really resonate, with the members of Congress, with the prudential regulators and the various agencies that we all advocate in front of it. I love it. They're working on the logos and all that as we speak. And so Jim will be unfolding that at a later time, but it's an exciting, I think it's an exciting name. It's an appropriate name for what we're doing, because we're representing, credit unions and 135 million, credit union members from coast to coast. And so I think it's an appropriate name, and I'm excited to see it unfold.
Okay, very good. So as a former marketer myself, the kind of marketing I did back in the day is probably considered caveman drawings to what professional marketing people do today. But I'll be waiting with anticipation on the brand and seeing how that's going to look when it comes out. So looking forward to it. So let's go with another question here. Dan, let's lead off with you on this one. And so by my estimation, about 1/3 of United States citizens are members of credit unions. So what are the potential benefits to our 130 million plus credit union members for this combination of these two trade associations?
I think it goes back to what Jim said earlier. We're going to have one powerful trade association under the umbrella of America's credit unions, and it's going to be really helpful for them, because that's what we do. Jim and I and our teams and our colleagues, they advocate, and the reason they advocate on behalf of credit unions is so credit unions can continue to serve the American consumer, because we believe genuinely that credit unions are the best option for financial services in the marketplace, period. And so you don't want 3 or 4 big banks controlling the entire financial services marketplace. So having one large, brand new trade association made up of the best will benefit the consumers and the 135 million, Americans that are members of credit unions. I think it's going to be very beneficial, not just for the members of America's credit unions, but more importantly, the 135 million Americans that they serve on a daily basis.
Very good. Jim, what are your thoughts on what this would mean to our members?
Yeah, I agree with Dan. I mean, strength and confidence, trust. These days, those are really important attributes that people expect in any institution. They're going to put their hard-earned money and work together as a partner. And most credit union members across the country, those 130 plus million people, are not going to know much about the trade association. That's not what we do. But I hope that the next time a credit union member sits across the table from a member services representative, and they come in with a dream, maybe, or they come in with a problem a financial problem they have that they're looking for some help. It may be their last resort. It may just be something they need to manage through to get from one paycheck to the next. I hope that when they're sitting there, that the member service representative feels the support of our compliance, that feels the support of our advocacy, that feels the support of our united voice, that might have even been part of the reason why that member walked through the door to begin with, because they heard really good, strong things about credit unions in general, let alone that one that happens to be in their neighborhood. I hope that that member feels that they're included, that they find their voice there, they find a friend there, they find a partner, somebody who might be tough with them and in getting them out of trouble or having to deal with a problem, because we're not. These are not easy things. We're not for charity. This isn't about that, but it is somebody who's going to, in some of the toughest financial times that people find themselves in, will be there with a motivation about them, not about making money, not about building a building, not about any of those things, but how can I help that member reach that dream or meet that challenge? And I hope both the member and that service representative feels the combined strength that they have when they're sitting at the table from all of their fellow credit union brothers and sisters across the country. And that's what an association can, if we do it right, can help them feel.
Absolutely. These are uncertain economic times for consumers, including our credit union members. I have not seen interest rates like this or inflation like this since maybe the early 80s. And so for a lot of consumers, they were not adults during that time. And this is the first time they face these kind of high inflationary times. And they wonder, well, who's going to help me figure these questions out? And it's credit unions that do that. We often villainize banks. Sometimes it's deserved. But I imagine the Bankers Association, the ABA, is shaking in their boots when they learned about this combination of the two institutions becoming even more powerful. So we'll have to see how that bears itself out, but our consumer members are counting on us to get this right. What do you say we move to another question here? So this is a complex transaction that impacts both your boards, the volunteers of both organizations, the staff, the members, the credit unions. What does this transaction look like? Starting with you, Jim. As you think about how you put the pieces together, this may be a little inside baseball for some of the rest of us, but so how is this going to work?
Well, and it is a little bit of inside baseball, but it does go to the bottom line value proposition and the finances, and because this is your trade association. So that's what an association, I mean, we all know that. We all serve our members, and we're only as powerful as the members that we serve. And that's what an association in this instance is. And Dan said it to start with. Our boards, when they came together, did not come together from any position of weakness. The NAFCU you see today and the CUNA you see today are as powerful as they've ever been in history, financially, in their voice, in their advocacy, in many of the services that we provide. It's not that there aren't things that we could all look at and say we could do this better, we could do that better. But my point is that we come to this from a position of strength, and our board said that. So that's number one. And so instead of just creating just another maybe new and improved version of NAFCU or new and improved 2.0 of CUNA, our boards have challenged us and our teams to build something new, to build something better, to take the very best of what we do and not be satisfied. And that's not easy to do, because there are some things that we're very proud of. There are some things that we both Dan and I know that if you look around at other associations, we do extremely well. But are we built for the future? Are we ready for what's coming 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And so our boards have said, that's the challenge. Don't just do it a little bit better than what we used to do. Let's really skate to, as Wayne Gretzky said, let's skate to a puck that's 10 years out. And let's not just make a transition. What we're calling it is a transformation. And so there are some, I've talked to a number of credit union CEOs that have talked to me about their viewpoint on mergers, and they've counseled me to go slow. They have counseled me not to just make a mash up and go forward, but to actually take this moment, this historical moment that you talked about in your first question, and let's take advantage of that moment in time, because this doesn't come around that often, where we can say, what do we want to build for the future? So that's how we see it. We're in the process right now of building teams. I announced just this last week that I've asked both COOs, Chief Operating Officers of both CUNA and NAFCU, to form a team, a transformation team, and to start building out sprint teams under an agile process, to start looking in every corner of both associations, every part of our value proposition, and more important than anything else is to listen to our members. We're going to be doing listening sessions around the country, both in person as well as virtual, because now is the time to ask members to lean into this process and say, what do you want more of? What do you want less of? What is that? Where is that puck going that we want to skate to in the future? And how are we going to get there?
Okay, very good. So I have to admit to you, Jim, when the news broke about the pending merger, my first thought was, is there something wrong? So I went to the CUNA's website, I went to the NAFCU website, and I pulled your financials, and I read them and took a look at your reserve allowances for both organizations, and I said, I don't see anything wrong here. Things are going well for both institutions. This must be something that's proactive, and this is, something that's prospectively good for credit unions, and not some movement out of weakness here. So that sort of laid to rest some fears that I may have had early on about this. So
well,
Dan,
and if I could, I know you're going to go to
Jim.
Dan. Let me just add one other small point, and that is, we're not missing a beat right now either. So yes, we're making this transformation, but Dan and I are coordinating our advocacy. You will see us continue to go to market together during this transformation, even during the member vote. We hope it turns out well, but we're moving forward in a positive way to come together. And we're doing that right now, even before the vote occurs, because that's what our members have told us they want us to do.
Absolutely. So Dan, what can you share with us about some of the internal mechanisms on what it takes to pull together a combination like this?
I won't be here for it. In all seriousness,
not so fast, not so fast, buddy. Not so fast.
That's right.
No, but Jim's right. We have people on both sides. Jim will be announcing teams into the future to do this transformation. These transition teams are going to be really important. They'll be made up of CUNA staff and NAFCU staff. It's going to be really, really important to get the culture right. And Jim's committed to that. The new transition board is committed to that. But the transition, it's moving along. We're focused on, and Jim and I are focused on getting the vote out and making this a positive vote. And so we're urging everybody to vote for the merger, because it's the right thing to do. And then to Jim's point, it is about the future. And you said it best, Maurice, it's about being proactive. I mean, we're going to be, within 5 years, probably down to 3,000 credit unions. And so from a business standpoint, it's going to be really important to have one powerful trade association under one umbrella, which is America's credit unions. And it just, that voice will be amplified. You're just going to have one very large, powerful organization overseeing it. And so, but the transition, it'll be ongoing. And then, the execution of that transition will occur through 2024. And so it's an exciting time, but I will be January 1 watching it from Florida. So I will be cheering Jim and everybody on and watching it from afar. I am committed to this. It's the right thing to do. And because there are going to be some headwinds, and Jim talked about it, there's going to be something that's out there. And there's always a black swan event that occurs. And so you need to have one powerful organization ready to help our members, whether it's with compliance or education and training, and of course the advocacy with Congress and the prudential regulators. So you have to be prepared for that. And the black swan could be some kid in his garage, parents' garage in Palo Alto, coming up with a new app trying to take market share away from credit unions and other community financial institutions. Something is going to occur. And so to have, you know, a well-planned, well-executed transformation is going to be absolutely crucial, and Jim's leading the way on that.
Absolutely. So we often talk about black swan events and things that can come along and create trouble for credit unions. And in 43 years in this movement, I think in my career, I counted, I've been through 5 recessions and been through inverted yield curves. And I think I've seen everything I could see in an economy except a depression or a negative rates in this country. From a first pandemic. So no telling what's going to come down the road later. And we need strong credit unions, trade associations on a national level to be able to take care of the interests of credit unions, but also more importantly, take care of the interests of our members in our various communities, because whether they know it or not, the members of our credit unions are counting on America's credit union to get it right and make sure that the public policy advocacy that you provide for all of us is going to protect each and every household that's represented by a credit union. So what do you say we take a look at another question here? And Dan, we're going to lead with you on this one. So like other stakeholders, because I imagine the two of you are having conversations with other trade associations and other stakeholders in the credit union movement, the AACUC membership has a special interest in this union. Slow down when I say that. What impact do you see that this merge is going to have on small credit unions, on minority depository institutions, or the minority community at large? Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
I think America's credit unions will continue to be focused the way NAFCU has always been focused, the way CUNA has always been focused, whether it's our compliance, whether it's our education and training, whether it's our advocacy. The asset size doesn't matter. I know it doesn't matter to Jim and his team. It doesn't matter to my team. You can be a $5 million credit union. We proudly help them just as much as we help a $50 billion credit union. So to have that compliance system in there, to have that ongoing education and training, and of course the advocacy, that'll be ongoing. So I still think it'll be there. The MDIs, you know, we've done a lot of work with MDIs and CDFIs. That will be ongoing. I can't imagine that falling off the radar. You got your mafia boss there in Renee's to make darn sure that it does go on. And if you don't know Renee, you're going to get a phone call or get a text on a Saturday night, which I've gotten both on those. And so she'll hold Jim accountable. She'll hold the new transition board accountable. But I think they're going to be well served with America's credit unions. And I'm excited about it. This is the right thing for the movement, and Jim's going to lead the way on it.
Very good. So Jim, you have been the supporter of DEI initiatives in the past. You have a thought perhaps on how America's credit union is going to continue that conviction for these important principles?
Well, first of all, if I've learned anything about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the 8th cooperative principle for credit unions, it's because I sat at your elbow, Maurice, as when you were the chair of the Credit Union National Association, as well as a number of opportunities where I got to see you lead by example. And so first of all, I thank you for that. And I also want to congratulate you on your induction to the Cooperative Hall of Fame that you're going to be having coming up here. It demonstrates, it really demonstrates a lifetime of commitment and work. And like I say, just getting it done, not just talking about it. And so I start there. Actions will speak louder than words. That's what my grandmother always told me. And I think that's true with this as well. And I think the actions we see within the credit union movement are pointing in the direction of recognizing that diversity is a strength that we celebrate. That unity is an important attribute and strategy as we go to market, as we talk to legislators and policymakers and regulators. But diversity is an important attribute that we should celebrate. It's also, there's a business case for it, as we know that that, you know, when people walk into a credit union, when they walk anywhere for that matter, the more they feel that they're seen, that they see people who see them, possibly they see people who look like them, who talk like them, who speak like them, who share a common journey, that often accrues to the bottom line in a positive way. And so diversity has its own business case. And then diversity and equity and inclusion. I mean, right now that is, you know, in order to celebrate freedom in this country, you have to have money. You can't just, I mean, it's one thing to say we have freedom. It's another thing to be able to go out and exercise it. And one of the ways, certainly having your health is certainly one of the important attributes to being able to exercise your freedom, but having some extra resources in your pocket to be able to exercise your freedom is important. And so what credit unions do is the right thing to do as we celebrate not only our country and America, but the need for all of our American citizens and those that are coming from abroad to be able to participate in this great democracy and achieve their dreams. So for me, it's the right thing to do. There's a business case for it. And it's also something that that we celebrate as part of the credit union movement, maybe different than many other movements that are out there. It was started because of a need for equity and inclusion in financial services. So there is a commitment there. It's commitment from me. It's a commitment from our board, but it's a commitment that is celebrated throughout the movement today, and you see it in so many different ways. So we appreciate the fact that you carry the torch for us, but we're right behind you in line and helping support you and others along the way.
Thank you for that, Jim. So this next question is, let's get a little more tactical about how we think about this. So I have, for some time, been a big supporter of DEI, but I'm not a tactical person. The people who actually implement the programs in our institutions, in our organizations, are much smarter than I, understanding what the issues are and how to actually accomplish that. So this is the next question here. I'd like to have Dan lead on this one, but maybe Dan, if you would think about answering this from the standpoint of what has NAFCU done in the past. I think it's important, as a prelude to the question, that the institutional memories we have about how we've done things in the past should not be lost in a combination like this. You know, that history is important and that muscle memory is important. Your voice is important. So my question is, there's roughly 52 million credit union members nationwide who identify as part of a minority group. So hence DEI is important to this audience for any number of reasons. The question is, how will America's credit union continue your priorities to ensure opportunities for all? But I'd like you to sort of talk to us, Dan, about what has NAFCU done in the past that under your leadership that you would like to see followed through under America's credit union?
Well, for me, I think one of the biggest problems in our country is financial inequity. And the way to overcome that, education is one of the key components. And so at NAFCU, we have a foundation, and we proudly support Renee and her various scholarships at AACUC. I would encourage that to continue, because education is a way to, break through that. We contributed to the NAACP scholarships, the United Negro College Fund scholarships. Then one of my other favorite organizations, besides AACUC, is Bite Back, which is BYTE. And it's a national organization that provides scholarships for people of color to get their computer certifications and their software certifications, where you're not just a $40,000 a year IT help desk person, but you're getting those $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 jobs in technology companies or at credit unions or other financial institutions. It gives them that certification, and it's an incredible organization. But I think that's one of the most important things that I would like to see continue is the support coming from America's credit unions, and continue to support those scholarship programs, because that's the best way to improve financial inclusion in our country across the board, especially for minorities. And so I would really like to see that ongoing. And that's, Jim said it best, actions speak louder than words. So I would like to continue to see people put the money in those programs that have been very successful and proven that they've worked. And so that's part of the legacy I'd like to see, that it started at NAFCU, and I'm sure CUNA still does, but it continue that program with America's credit unions, because it's effective and it works.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan. So Jim, DEI Conversations is a business. There's a business model for it and a business argument for it. But it also requires, specialized training and intentionality to make it happen. I've learned that in my former organization, because my staff were keen to let me know how much I didn't know about DEI, even though I thought I might do something about it. But when I realized the true professionals who come into the room, they can show me blind spots that I didn't even know existed. So America's Credit Union comes along, and you have the combined organizations, and you start thinking about, how do we draw upon a larger pool of folks to create the right kind of population for America's credit unions? Any thoughts from you tactically on how you might like to think about that?
I love Dan's answer, and I was trying to think of another approach, and I think another approach is leadership. That's another way to think about this, and it doesn't only mean, although it's important to recognize that we're making some strides with regard to those that are leading credit unions as presidents and CEOs and managers. We've seen some strong, diverse leaders come into our movement in the past 10 years, but it's not enough. We have seen women now overtake the majority of president and CEO slots, but primarily with smaller, more modest level asset classes rather than some of the large ones, although lately 2 of the largest have been women. So I mean, we're making progress, but still more can be done. And it's not to suggest that that's the only way to do it, but I think it does give a measuring stick to, if we're making progress, to see people of diverse backgrounds, color and ethnicity and gender that are beginning to move up in the ranks too. So before you can become a CEO, we need to fill the ranks of CFOs and chief marketing officers and chief lending officers and so forth and so on. And how do we not only create that pipeline, and Dan said it about education, but continue to allow that pipeline to lead toward the leadership that we're looking for, as well as on our boards. So it's one thing to talk about the actual leaders of the credit union, but we also need to, and we're seeing more of this, but it can continue to improve when it comes to the leadership and the population of members that serve on credit union boards or on our national association board. I would encourage, certainly you go through a transition, those that have been through those know that there is a period of time when you have a transition board. But both NAFCU and CUNA have had some outstanding, very diverse leaders. We want that to continue. Both boards have said that. Both boards are committed to that kind of a process. And the slots that we've created in this democratic movement that we enjoy, I think are ripe for people of diverse backgrounds to step up and say, I'm ready to lead. I want to lead. I want to have my voice at the table. In addition to that, there's going to be, and we haven't decided this yet, but both NAFCU and CUNA has a very robust committee system and task force system where voices from the movement have seats at the table where we can enjoy the conversation about pushing us and learning and how do we grow, how do we keep this front and center. I got to tell you, I mean, what AACUC has done in the last, I hate to even say, you know, a time, but particularly the last 3 years, I don't know if that's been matched by anybody. I've learned, I'll just speak for myself. I have learned so much. I spoke about this at the AACUC meeting. I mean, I had a lot of blind spots. It doesn't mean I was insensitive, but it meant I had a lot to learn. I had a lot of areas that I needed to grow as a leader. And AACUC has done that with the commitment to change and everything that you've done in a very patient, educating, and collaborative way. And I think that's what we need more of. So those are some of the ways that I think America's credit unions can lean into this, providing those seats at the table and ensuring that the leaders of the future continue to be growingly diverse as the country that we're serving.
Very good. So Jim, I hope I don't embarrass you with this next statement. And because I want to share a conversation, 2 conversations that you had with leaders of this movement. I was in the room and you had been at CUNA maybe a couple of years, and you're meeting with CEOs of some of the largest credit unions. I won't call out the name of the meeting, but just sort of set the context for the room. And you bring up the topic of diversity at the CEO seat. And there need to be more minorities and more women who were woefully underrepresented in this room. And your points landed with a thud. You could have heard crickets in the room. Now, most people would take that kind of response and say, well, let's just bury that, move on. The next year, you come back and you double down and you mention it again and talk for 3 times as long about it. That sounds like a person who's convicted to make sure that we get this right. And so I have admired you for the conviction you have to come back. Usually if I take a beating, I don't come back a second time, but you came back for it to say, I want to make sure this audience understands how important this is. And you have been consistent in your advocacy in this area. So I thank you for that. So we have exhausted the setup questions that I had for you. So now I get to ambush you, both of you, with a couple of questions that just come to mind while we were having this conversation, while we have a few more minutes to proceed. So as I think about a merger of 2 organizations, there has to be some fears that people might have. What does it mean for my organization, for my community, for the public policies of credit unions that my credit union might advocate for? And will I get lost in the new organization? I imagine there may be some fears that some might have. But to me, the antidote for fear is engagement. It's asking questions. It's being involved. So I'd like to just sort of toss this question out on the table to the 2 of you. You know, so what would you say to our colleagues and our stakeholders who are feeling a little fear right now about this merger? How would you put them at ease?
Let me go first, Dan, if you don't mind, because I think one of the things that, I mean, I'll just say it the way I'm thinking about it, but because I was chosen to go forward as the CEO, and Dan has been and continues to be a class act in this transformation. He's been a partner and a friend and a collaborator, and I hope that I not only expect that will continue, I hope it will continue. But I've learned a lot also in competing at the national level with Dan and CUNA with NAFCU. And I want to speak very plainly about that. There are some things that CUNA does that I'm very proud of, and I wouldn't want to stand in second place to anybody. But there are some things NAFCU does that we have not been able to touch. And I'll speak. The first is responsiveness. NAFCU has been so responsive, so engaging, so personable about this. Dan in particular has just been such an outstanding leader when it comes to that engagement. And I think CUNA has often used the excuse, well, that's not the right way to put it, but maybe had the excuse that we had so many members that it was hard to have an intimate relationship with some of the leadership of credit unions. A and B, we've also had this system of CUNA was the wholesale deliverer of the value proposition, and our leagues were the retail deliverer of that product. I can tell you in my listening sessions, even before the merger happened, members expect, if they're going to pay the dues that we're asking them to pay, if they're going to have the kind of relationship with the association they want going forward, they want to know us. They want to know me. They want to know the team. They want to know the value proposition. They want to be able to stick their finger in my chest and say, hey, buddy, you got that wrong. Or you got this right. Would you do more of it? And I got to tell you, NAFCU has been very agile, very able to be nimble in that regard. And it's something that is not just Dan. I mean, I give him credit for the leadership and the inspiration at that level, but his entire team is like that, and they're built that way. And so, and not to suggest CUNA isn't trying and able to do a lot of that, but that's an area that I think NAFCU has excelled in. And it's one that as we go forward, I think the trade association for the future needs to, because we only have now less than 5,000 members, we can have that kind of intimate dialogue and collaboration as a movement better than ever before, particularly when we were created around 20,000 plus credit unions. So we're in a position now where we can do that, and that's something the board going forward is going to expect. And I know members have told me that as well. I hear you loud and clear, and I think it's something being fiercely member-centered. And that delivering that value proposition directly, not assuming somebody else is going to do it with you or for you only, is something we're going to take forward.
Very good. Thank you, Jim. So Dan, how would you respond to your members and others in the movement who's losing sleep over this right now? And how would you comfort them now?
Well, first of all, I think the information that Jim and the transformation team have put out and will continue to put out is really going to be important. More details are going to be coming forward over the next weeks, months, and of course next year. I think that from my NAFCU member or the joint member standpoint, Jim's hitting it. He's hitting everything in stride. He's talking about the compliance, talking about the responsiveness. That's going to be ongoing. And the new transition board is going to hold Jim and the management team to account. And Brian Schools, who's my vice chair, is going to be the chair of America's Credit Unions. He is not a shrinking violet. And if you think he's not going to hold Jim accountable, and along with all the other board members, they're demanding a new trade association made of the best of the best. And I trust the board members of the transition board. I trust Jim. And I think going forward, you're going to see a really robust, powerful trade association. And so there's nothing to be fear of. And I understand there is fear and there are people that have questions. Jim has been direct. I've been direct and blunt in my approach when I'm asked questions, and that's going to continue. And so I would say, give it a chance. More details are coming. Give Jim and his transformation team a chance and watch this unfold, because we are going to create a one heck of an organization here in Washington, D.C., and we're going to take it to the bankers and we're going to take it to the fintechs. It's going to be a powerful organization, and it's going to be diverse, and it'll be inclusive, and we're going to take that very seriously. But I would not have a fear. More information's coming. And I'm not a patient person, as those of you that know me. And so I want stuff done like yesterday. And my colleagues will tell you that as well. But I'm asking for some patience. You know, the more information is coming and more of the planning is coming. And Jim's been forthright, and that's going to continue to be unfolded here and in the coming weeks and months. And I'm excited for one. And I urge folks to vote for it. The timing is right, and the two organizations haven't been, you know, stronger. This is the strongest we've both been, and I think you're gonna see an incredible transition, as Jim says, a credible transformation going forward. But I put those fears to rest. And if you have questions, call Jim directly. He'll call you back. I text him late at night and he gets back to me within a couple minutes. So he's being responsive to me and others on my team that reach out to him. And so I encourage you, have questions, give me a call, give Jim a call, give the board members a call. They would love to talk to you about why this is happening and the positive aspects of it all.
Very good. Well, I thank you both for answering that question. Before I turn the mic over to you for final commentary, you know, Renee reminds me of the AACUC event. We start on time, we end on time. So I'm not going to break that trend. But I want to thank you both for being a part of this conversation. It's incredibly affirming and comforting to the AACUC membership and stakeholders that the two of you would come here and be a part of this conversation. Imagine other trade associations and other audiences in the credit union space tugging on your coattails because they want to be seen. They want to know that they are being acknowledged by the board and management of the America's credit unions. But AACUC is no less than that. And we believe the value proposition we provide to our members is not just training and education and collaboration and public policy, but it's also making sure that our members are plugged into the larger credit union space, that they have opportunities to participate in that, but also our leaders are sensitive to the particular needs of our membership. So the fact that the two of you have come along here, agreed to this, and for the rest of you who are part of the audience and you are listening to this conversation, we did not have to twist Jim or Dan's arms to get them here. Well, maybe the mafia boss did. I didn't have to do it, but I think they willingly agreed to come and be a part of this conversation, and I am so very grateful for that. So my last question for you is actually not a question. So you had these scripted questions and a couple of curveballs for you. I want to leave space for the two of you to sort of speak what's on your heart and your mind at this time. I have to tell you, I said it earlier that this feels like goosebumps to me. This is a poignant moment for me. I'm a credit union nerd, and I remember reading the publication that CUNA put out back in the 80s, back in the 70s, the credit union movement, and reading about the history about it and what we represent in our philosophy and our principles. And I mean, I was hooked from day one. And to speak, this is huge news. This is a big transformation for the national infrastructure for credit unions. And I've had a few emotional moments to think about what this means and to reconcile it for myself. But imagine the two of you who are really close to it probably have some thoughts as well. And if you wish to share it with us, then I think our audience would appreciate knowing that the leaders who are building this new machine for credit unions have a personal connection to it as well. So Dan, how about sharing with us any thoughts you might have, anything that you would like to share, any questions that may not have come up in the middle of this conversation, you feel like, well, there's a point I want to get across. You have the floor, my friend.
Thank you, Maurice. I appreciate it. And thanks to Renee and everybody at AACUC. I appreciate the opportunity to share this time with Jim and answer some questions and just to see everybody again. For me, and very similar, Maurice, I've been a credit union member since I was 9 years old. Bought my first car from a credit union in Gainesville, Florida, because my dad made me take out a loan for $600 to buy an ugly pea green Pontiac Catalina. It was an ugly vehicle. I couldn't get a date through high school because I had that ugly car. But it's my love for credit unions. It started when I was 9, and then I had the opportunity to be at NAFCU almost 20 years now, and so going on 18 years. And so my love and affection, and I genuinely, we talk about it a lot within NAFCU, we talk about a why. And our why is that we're passionate about credit unions and the credit union movement and the credit union industry. It is absolutely crucial that credit unions are there for the American consumer. The 135 million Americans across our country that are members of a credit union need to have a credit union. You don't want 3 or 4 big banks controlling everything. And so the power of AACUC to lean in on this, and Renee and I have talked about this a lot, to lean in, continue to have your voices heard, continue to promote your scholarships and stuff, because education is key to a lot of this. And, you know, the mob boss will hold Jim and the board accountable, guaranteed, because I've got the texts and the phone calls and emails from her to prove it. I want to keep those in archive. And so, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I will miss it. I will be watching from afar. I'm still and will remain a credit union member. You know, my primary financial institution is a credit union and will remain so. But I'm rooting for a successful transformation, a successful transition. And starting beginning of 2025, you're going to see one incredible America's credit union. And so I couldn't be more proud of something that I played a small role in. And Jim said it earlier, that this wasn't a Dan thing. This was my colleagues created the culture at NAFCU. And it was, of course, based on relationships and advice and guidance from people like Renee and other people at AACUC. And so I just want to thank everybody for your friendship and your support. And the occasional beatings that I got from Renee and others, well deserved. But no, it's been one heck of a ride. I love you all, and so thank you.
Thank you, Dan. You're gonna make me cry. All right, Jim,
I'm trying not
you're
to.
up. What's on your mind?
Well, first of all, Dan, thank you for that. That inspires me, and I know it inspires everyone. And I think probably the thing you think about at times like this, you were talking about history as the opening question, and our history rides on some pretty important principles. And one of the most important, well, they're all important, so I don't want to single any out as the most important, but I'll tell you one that I think we need to think about at this point in time, and that's Principle 6. And that's how cooperatives cooperate with one another. We are the association we're trying to create is the cooperative of all the cooperatives. That's what we're trying to create. And in order for that to work, I wish I had an ability to come up with a quote that could be as memorable as the one I'm thinking of from John F. Kennedy when he said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country." And so I would leave you with this as a thought. There's a lot of what is America's credit unions going to do? And I take that responsibility and accountability to all of you as potential members going forward, and to the people that I will report to as our governance. But I want to challenge you back and say, ask yourself as well, what are you willing to do? And I think particularly of advocacy. I think particularly of how we raise the credit union voice into a united voice. It's one thing for our board to say we're going to create an association of a united voice, but what's your part in that choir? What are you willing to sing? Are you willing to practice? Are you willing to learn the music? Are you willing to share your beautiful music as part of that? Are you willing to participate in this organization? The United States and Washington, D.C. is full of associations that have members that write a check, send it in, and do nothing else. They basically say, you guys take my resources and get the job done. Why credit unions have been so successful, and I believe will be successful in the future, is because that's never been our attitude. We ask that next question and say, what else can we do? And so I would just challenge you to think about that. I will come up with what I think those are, in addition to obviously hoping you invest in this association and you vote for the merger. But I will also take it on as my responsibility to challenge you back and say, these are the things I believe would be important at this juncture for you to consider doing as part of this association, as part of this cooperative of all the cooperatives. And that's what I'm thinking about today. And I hope you'll continue, all of you will continue to share your thoughts about this as we move forward, because it's your association.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Thank you both gentlemen here for being a part of this conversation. Jim, you and Dan, you're a first-class act. The AACUC membership thanks you for seeing us and inviting us to be a part of this dialogue. We're looking forward to the next step, and AACUC will be a supporter, sometimes maybe a thorn in your side, but we will always be fighting for what's good for credit unions, our membership, and for our community. Thank you all for being a part of this conversation today. We look forward to seeing you on the next, commitment to change dialogue. There will be others arriving, but thank you for your membership and for being credit union folks. Good day.